Welcome, everybody, to our Thursday afternoon doubleheader of webinars. My name is James Redd. I'm with Providence Engineering and Environmental, aka Providence ORIS. And we're going to start off this first webinar by discussing with you, or showing you rather, some of the new features that are in our latest version of Beast, version 12.12. Now, as always, whenever we have a new release of Beast, we have several items that we are incorporating, like bug fixes that do happen periodically. We also include enhancements to the software that's suggested by those in our user community, as well as enhancements suggested by us in the Providence Source house. And then we'll always have to update Beast whenever there's an update to any of the core EPA programs that are a part of it, like AirMod, AirMet, and so forth. So, as you are well aware, several new versions of these AirMod system programs were released last year by EPA, including AirMod version 24142, AirMap 24142, AirMet 24142, and AirSurface 24142. And so all of these compiled executable programs have to be incorporated into Beast, and these are. And we also have to be cognizant of changes made by EPA in their regulatory guidance. For example, what's in the guideline air quality models, because that can add in model applications too. So it might affect some other part of Beast as well. So in Beast, this new version 12.12, we've updated it to include support for all of the new keywords and options that are in AirMod 24142. And we'll talk about maybe the most important ones a little later in this talk. We've updated Beast to include support for all the new keywords for AirMap 24142. We have added the ability to copy sources when viewing inputs graphically. We have added a button to help you edit area poly source vertices in the source grid view. And Beast now keeps a line you draw on screen after you measure the distance between 2 points. And I'll show you an example of that as well. One thing I want to mention just briefly, because this is going to be more covered in more detail in the following webinar. We have also added the ability to select the receptor grids you want to use at runtime. Originally, Beast only could handle 5 individual receptor grids, and they could be a mishmash of Cartesian or polar. Well, now we have increased that number of grids from 5 to 50. And as I said, we'll be talking more about these in the webinar coming after this. So let's talk next about the changes that have been made to our AirMet user interface, or GUI. So as I said previously, we have updated it to include all the new keywords and options in AirMet version 24142, and updated it to include all the new keywords and options in AirSurface 24142. And if you were watching what happened, I guess it was last fall, the EPA, not EPA, somebody else in the federal government, I guess NOAA, took down their website where you previously got your upper air data in FSL format. And so now our default upper air format going forward is going to be Integrated Global Radio Site Archive, or IGRA. And so when you're going into AirMet, that option will be the default there. And since AirMet 2412 requires the upper air station base elevation, you can enter that directly on the interface screen or you can have AirMet's the GUI read it from the upper air data and fill it in for you automatically. So here is the upper air page from the AirMet GUI, and right here is where now the default is IGRA. And so here you can either type in the elevation if you know what it is, or you can click read location, and AirMet will read the header the header record and populate that for you automatically. Very similar to what's in the SFC tab, where you tell AirMet to read the header and it'll populate all the fields for you. The ID, latitude, longitude, and then base elevation. So and it looks something like that. Uh, Now you can put that in by hand, as I said, or we have a new tool that came out last fall, late last fall, I guess, called the IGRA Files Extractor, and this is now a part of the AirMet system, or the AirMet GUI, I should say, which is to say it's a part of Beest as well. And so if you go to the IGRA Files Extractor, it just basically says that, well, first of all, all the upper air data that you get in IGRA format are in one file for each upper air station, all years included. So some of these go back several decades, which means that they're going to be quite large files. The IGRA files extractor allows you to write out an upper air data file for just the date range you need. For example, if you wanted to process data from January 2019 to January 2024, you can tell it, I just want these days. And if the upper air station's base elevation is missing, it's usually flagged in the data set as a minus 88888 or minus 99999 missing data flag. And so if you see that, or if there's any of those occurrences in the data file, the IGRA files extractor will prompt you for the correct elevation. And then the program will go through and replace all occurrences of those missing base elevations. So with kind of that brief introduction, let me just kind of take you on a quick tour of IGRA files extractor. It looks something like this. You have a file and a help drop down at the top, and then a setup tab and a run tab. So if we go to the help drop down first, there's the user manual that kind of goes through and tells you how to set it up and run it. And there's also a station list. So these are all of the upper air stations that are in this IGRA format that's been archived. And if you look at that list, it looks a little different than what we were used to before, and it looks maybe a little confusing, but it's not so bad when you kind of know where the different fields go and what they mean. So in the first three letters, that's the country code. I'm not sure what ACM is, but that's a country somewhere. Next is the latitude for the station, the longitude for the station, the base elevation of the station, which is very important, and then the name of the station. And over here we have the year that they started collecting data and the year they stopped collecting data. So some of these go back to, my goodness, 1935. That's a huge data set, or actually it would be if it went through today. So anyway, this is kind of a little roadmap to tell you what's out there. So if you looked at this station list and scroll down, you would find out the U.S. upper air stations start with the letters USM, and then over here, right before the name of the station is the state that the station is located at. So this one is Barrow, Alaska, and started collecting data in 1932 and has it up through the present. So that is a very large size file. And there's another option here in the help menu called download IGRA data. And if you click it, it takes you to this link. And it's the last one here is data slash or data dash POR. I believe POR is period of record. And when you go to that data POR, here they all are. Again, the first three digits is the country, the last five is the ID, and um, the size of the file. And again, these are all zip files, but they're still, some of them are very, very large. So the files are sorted alphabetically by country code. So ACM comes first, and so forth. So let's look at the setting up to run it. So assuming that you've gone and downloaded one of these huge upper air files, you're going to tell the files extractor what file it is you want to cut out the data you need. So you just click browse and select it. And then here in the select output file, you're going to tell it what you want to call the extracted file for the 5 years or the 1 year, whatever time frame you're looking at that you want to extract it. And then tell it what date range you want to extract. I think the example I gave before was January the 1st of 2019 to January 1st of 2024. And then the last thing is telling it what the base elevation should be for missing elevations with the missing data flags. And from the time you select your file and tell it the output and everything else, it runs very quickly. So moving on to other parts of Beast, there were changes made to the air surface GUI. And so now the year on the input files pop-up now requires you to input that year rather than there being a drop down. And this is therefore future growth, you might say. So here's your air surface screen in the AirMet GUI. And there's the input files button. And if you click it, this is now where you would just type in whatever the actual year of the data was. And then there's a download button that takes you to the MRLC website. Download it. Alternatively, you can go to this EPA link, which has their land cover database data from 2011 through 2021. So here's the parent directory of that, 2011, 2013, 2016, 2019, and 2021. They do not have 2023 data in this directory yet. So that's AirMet and Air Surface. Go back to Beast now. And we have added the ability to copy sources when viewing your inputs graphically. So here's an example where I have a source in here. It's hidden by the yellow or the right-click menu here. But now you can click copy and then left-click where you want that copied source to go. So maybe you're working on a project that you wanted to permit 2 new engines, and you found out that your client wants to make it 3 new engines. Well, now you can just, and if the parameters are all the same, you can just do a file, right-click copy and put that source, some of the location, and then obviously you have to give it a new name since you can't have duplicate names. Remember, you could do this for buildings and fence lines, but now you can also do it for sources. And I just mentioned that add the viewing inputs in show current data graphically. We have added a button that allows you to edit area poly sources or polysource vertices in the source grid view. So here's an example where we have a facility with an area polysource, that little weird polygon there. And to edit them now, you go to Source Options, Grid View, and the Area Poly tab, which looks like this. And now you have the number of vertices set here, and you can add to this number. And then when you do, you can click Edit Vertices in the bottom left-hand corner and populate them with the correct values. If you have, if you haven't drawn them in for, let's say, so they would look something like this. And if you've gone in and said, I don't want to be 5, I want it to be 9. When you clicked Edit Vertices, this would come up with your existing 5 vertices and then blank for 6 through 9, and you type them in here. And some of this can also be accessed with the Edit Source button in Source Options, Sources menu. So if you are in Source Options and you go to the Poly field right there and click Edit Source, you'll have the sort of the same thing in terms of the polygon vertices edit down here, where you can call it up and type in the corrections. You can't add them here. Well, I should say you can't edit them with this right here. You can add them where it says number of vertices, and then again, if you click polygon vertices, it'll come up with your existing vertices followed by the blank fields that you're going to populate. Let's see, what else did we do? Oh, Beast keeps the line on screen after you do the measurement of distance between 2 points. So here's an example of you right click and select measure line length and angle. And when you do, you draw it in, and there's your line. And at the bottom, it tells you the length and the angle. And it stays on screen until you right click and then select measure line length and angle parentheses off, and then it turns it off. I found out, I guess by accident, that as long as you have measure line length and angle on, you can draw a whole bunch of lines on screen, and they don't go away until you come back and right click and do the measure line length and angle off. It can probably look a little silly. So we're going to talk about some changes related to control options. So here's the control options page, and if you go to AER non-default, notice here where they have a list, where we have a listing of beta options, there are none. There are no beta options there anymore 2412, partly because if you go to AIR NO2, now GRSM, the general reaction set method, which is an NO2 or NO to NO2 conversion algorithm, is now a regulatory option under a tier 3. And so it is no longer beta. And it's no longer beta. And it requires background ozone data like OLM or PVMRM, but it also requires background ambient NOx data. And so you have 2 drop downs at the bottom of the screen to get the ozone data and the NOx data. And then in addition to GRSM, the R-line source type and the core AirMet keyword are now also regulatory options. In the previous version of previous version of Beast, Air Mod and AirMet, those were beta options. Now they're regulatory. So here is just a little brief showing you of changes made to the receptor options. And as I mentioned, the next webinar will go into a little more detail on this. And you'll notice that We used to have just 5, but now you can have up to 50 grids. So here's an example where you can do a program generated Cartesian, and you have to give it an ID. And then if it's a polar grid, you have to give it an origin, easting and northing, or centered on a source ID, just kind of like you also have with previously. So each of the up to 50 grids has to have its own ID. And the discrete receptors tab here will also include the grid ID. So here's an example. We have a facility and a building and a stack, and we've got 3 program-generated Cartesian grids. If you go to look in receptor options in the grid tab, you see now that there's a grid 1, a grid 2, and a grid 3. And so if we want to generate another 47 more, we can do that as well. And then at the bottom are the grid editing tools that you've seen before. You can edit a particular grid, convert it to discrete, or delete it. And if you convert it to discrete, now you'll see that it takes the network name grid 1 and has the easting and northing, and a little note out here where it came from grid 1. And in this case, this was converted discrete, but air map has not been written yet, so that's why you don't see an elevation or a hill height here. And kind of in the closing here, a couple of other little things that have been updated in Beast. The scheduler, which you use to run batch files, has been updated to run AirMod 24142, and has also been updated to run AirMap 24142. And our Windrose program, which you can access inside of Met options, we've added support for processing metadata or incorporating metadata for 2024 and 2025. We kind of want to get ahead of the game, so to speak. And we've also added support for incorporating any metadata that was generated by a user with AirMet version 24142. So with that, that is the end of this talk. Again, my name is James Redd. My email address and phone are there on screen. At this point, I guess I'll open up to any questions you may have.
Hi, James. Thank you. Just a quick question. Are you guys going to be providing these materials or a recording? I mean, similar to what you guys have done in the past with, putting them on YouTube or just putting them on a link to your website?
I'll
Yes.
take that. Yeah, we're recording the presentation right now, and it'll be uploaded to our website under the webinars section under Beast.
Any other questions?
Hi, James. I had a question regarding the IGRA database. Will the AirMod wizard now link directly to the IGRA database as it earlier did to FSL?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Will the AirMod wizard link to the IGRA database? Has that been updated? Has AirMod wizard been updated to link to IGRA database instead of FSL?
I think if you try to click a link, an old link to go to FSL, you'll get a screen that comes up and says, this is no longer an active website. So it does not automatically redirect you, as far as I know.
So I think the AirMet GUI that's part of Beast 12.12 does link to the right website for IGRA, the new IGRA data. I think you're asking about AirMod Wizard. AirMod Wizard
Yes.
has not yet been updated so that it goes to the right site. So you'll need to it would be better to use the 241 the AirMet GUI in Beast rather than the one in Wizard for the moment until we can get Wizard updated.
Okay, all right, but that's forthcoming, the update to Wizard.
Yes, we have
Yes.
Wizard updates on the schedule kind of as soon as we fix this one.